Good evening, and welcome to the University of Chicago, Francis and Rose Ewan campus in Hong Kong, for our last program of 2020. Tonight's Hong Kong Redux program is entitled The Intersection Between Chinese Opera and Hong Kong Cinema. My name is Mark Barnico, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Chicago, Francis and Rose Ewan campus in Hong Kong, our premier location in Asia, representing UChicago values of free and open discourse, rigorous debate, and the exchange of ideas. We're streaming tonight's event live via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. You can submit your questions through the questions and answer button by first registering on Zoom. If you're registered on Zoom, you can also select simultaneous translation into Cantonese and Mandarin by clicking on the globe icon on the bottom of your screen and selecting your language. Tonight, we have invited 5 top scholars on this subject to talk about a variety of aspects and share their views on the intersections between Cantonese opera and Hong Kong cinema. Let me briefly introduce them in the order they'll appear this evening. Professor Gina Marchetti will share her thoughts on the influence of Cantonese opera in Hong Kong women filmmakers. Professor Marchetti teaches courses in film, gender and sexuality, critical theory, and cultural studies at the University of Hong Kong. She's the author of Romance and the Yellow Peril, Race, Sex, and Discursive Strategies in Hollywood Fiction, From Tiananmen to Times Square, Transnational China and the Chinese Diaspora on Global Screens, The Chinese Diaspora and on American Screens, Race, Sex, and Cinema, and Citing China, Politics, Postmodernism, and World Cinema. Her most recent book is the Palgrave Handbook of Asian Cinema, co-edited with Aaron Hanjun Magnan Park and C. Kam Tan. Professor Kenny Ng is an associate professor at the Academy of Film. He's currently working on a monograph, The Cultural Cold War and Contested Chineseness in Hong Kong Cinema, supported by the Hong Kong University Grants Committee's Humanities and Social Sciences prestigious fellowship. Dr. Ng is only one of 9 2019 and 2020 awardees across Hong Kong. He examines how creative people move beyond ideological divides and deploy dynamics of storytelling, image building, interactive listening, and performing to appeal to disparate Chinese audiences and tastes. By unveiling how filmmakers exploited mass culture and media in rapidly commercializing Chinese societies, the study reveals the tension between political rhetoric and cultural representations. Professor Yung Sai-Shing obtained his BA and MPhil degrees from the Department of Chinese University of Hong Kong, and PhD from Princeton University. Specializing in traditional Chinese drama, Professor Yung has been teaching in the National University of Singapore since 1991. His research interests include late Ming drama, social history of Cantonese opera music, 1900 to 1965, Chinese gramophone culture and sound studies, cinematic and pulp culture of Hong Kong, and cultural Cold War in Asia. His major publications include The Anthropology of Chinese Drama, Ritual, Theater, and Community, Cantonese Opera from the Gramophone, A Cultural History, 1903 to 1953, From Red Boat to Silver Screen, Visual and Sonic Culture of Cantonese Opera, and the edited book, A Study on the Taiping Theater Collection. He's currently working on 2 book projects titled Exploring Urban Soundscape, Chinese Opera Media and Hong Kong Cinema, and Theater, Steamship, and Gramophone, A Cultural History of Chinese Opera of Hong Kong, 1860 to 1911. Professor Hedy Law is going to speak tonight about Cantonese opera and Cantonese musicals. Professor Law is an associate professor of musicology at the University of British Columbia. She received her BA in piano performance and a postgraduate diploma in education at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She obtained a master's degree in musicology at Oxford University and a PhD in music history and theory at the University of Chicago. After her graduation, she taught at UChicago as a Harper Schmidt Fellow of the Society of Fellows. Then she worked at Southern Methodist University in Dallas before moving to Vancouver. She's interested in the interplay of music, language, and gesture in 18th century music, French opera, and related theatrical genres, media aesthetics, gender, and Enlightenment studies. She designed and taught an undergraduate course on Cantonese music at UBC in early 2020. Our moderator this evening, Professor Judith Zeitlin, is William R. Kinnan, Jr., Professor, East Asian Languages and Civilizations at the University of Chicago. Professor Zeitlin's work combines literary history with other disciplines such as performance, music, visual and material culture, medicine, gender studies, and film. She refers to herself as a ghostologist, since she's written so extensively on ghosts and still retains an active interest in the subject. Her book, The Phantom Heroine, Ghosts and Gender in 17th Century Chinese Literature, explores the representation of ghosts across the range of literary genres in the late Ming and early Qing. Professor Zeitlin's research and teaching have become increasingly oriented toward the performing and visual arts as a way of engaging actively with all the senses. Her interest in music, especially as related to opera, Chinese and European, is driving much of her current research, creative projects, and collaborative endeavors. She co-curated an exhibition with a catalog called Performing Images, Opera in Chinese Visual Culture at UChicago's Smart Museum of Art in 2014. She's been involved with the Neubauer Collegium at the University of Chicago and has also taught at the Center for Interdisciplinary Innovation. As a result of her Mellon grant from the Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry at the University of Chicago, Professor Zeitlin is currently collaborating with China-based contemporary composer Yao Chen to co-write an English language opera called Ghost Village, based on a Liaozhai tale. Professor Zeitlin, I'll turn the stage over to you and you can share your initial comments to get us started.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I'm in Chicago, so it's early morning for me. I wish very much that I were there in flesh at the beautiful Hong Kong Center. I'm very excited to introduce today's panel, or really to sort of set the ball rolling on this amazingly rich topic. Today we're talking about the intersection between Cantonese opera and Hong Kong cinema, but this is really also part of a much larger project that I've been involved with and many other people have been involved with in trying to work through the amazing legacy of Chinese opera and its relationship to cinema, sound culture, visual culture. And it's in some ways unique, both unique in terms of world music and theater and cinema. And on the other hand, it's very much part of a much larger process, so that opera and film have been intertwined from the very beginning, both in Europe and the US and in Asia. So it's a famous story that the earliest film ever made in China was Tan Xin Pei's, a scene from a famous Peking opera performance, long lost. And even in Europe, to us, it seems really counterintuitive that you would have silent films that would be about opera, but that was the case too. And there's something about these intertwining of these two media that's remarkably productive. But the history in East Asia, specifically in the Sinophone world and in the diaspora of that world, both in the US and in Southeast Asia, is a really important story. It's also a story of border crossing after 1949, before 1949. And so this is a project that I myself have been involved with, I realized, for 10 years as a kind of sideline. So that in 2009, we held a conference at the University of Chicago on Chinese opera film after 1949, which resulted in an issue called of the Opera Quarterly, the first one that they ever did that wasn't on European opera, which I think is still a kind of reference work. But because we had a very tiny budget and couldn't bring anybody from Asia, and because we knew we had just focused on the PRC at that point, we convened another conference in 2012 at the University of Chicago Center in Beijing with other partners. And that's where I first met Professor Ying and Professor Yong, who were at this conference, because one of our aims at that point was to introduce Hong Kong, Taiwan, and a kind of larger global process across East and Southeast Asia. And then in 2019, I came back to this topic in another very oblique way, in which through a conference we held at the University of Chicago called Connecting the Dots Through Guobao Chang. And this was on contemporary Chinese opera, film, and TV, in which we had the premiere of a film that Guobao Chang had directed in 2005, but that was not ever really properly released, called Dream of the Bridal Chamber, Chun Gui Meng. And so today's panel, which I hope will continue the conversation, intersection between Cantonese opera and Hong Kong film. So one of the questions that you might ask, and our panelists are going to talk to you about, is what do we mean by intersection? And that intersection, of course, takes many different forms. I think what you might think of most of all are simply filmed operas, either documentary films that are simply recording stage performances or that are made into feature films. But there are many other kinds of intersections. One of the things that first attracted me to this topic and roused my curiosity was seeing some Mandarin language feature films done in the 1960s that were historical dramas in which women still played the scholar roles, still cross-dressed as scholar roles. And I was quite amazed by this. I saw it quite rightly as a very direct legacy of operatic conventions. So the incorporation of operatic conventions into film is also quite pronounced, again, both in Cantonese and Mandarin language cinema in Hong Kong, whether it is musical percussion patterns, whether it's gestures. I think role types continue to be very important. So there are all sorts of ways in which these kinds of theatrical gestures from opera continue to be part of Hong Kong cinema. Other ways that it can be incorporated, of course, are through either backstage dramas in which you have biopics or you have storylines about operatic troupes or actresses. One of the more recent ones of that was called Hu Du Men, the Stage Door from 1987. And you can also have other kinds of interactions which are between live performance and cinema. So one of the things that we find is that these two art forms and mass media forms are not in competition with one another, but actually feed into one another, so that you can have a very successful stage production that's made into a film, that could be then made into a musical, it could be made into a film. You can use film production as a way, of course, bringing people to see their favorite stars when they are not available, and you can bring the stars to promote the films. So there are many, many different ways. One of the things that Hong Kong has going for it that I really would like to give a nod out is the amazing Hong Kong Film Archive. And the work that they do in terms of archiving the films, the kinds of path-breaking and exhibitions that they've done and festivals, and their publications that we all rely on. And quite fortuitously, a wonderful book has just come out on the subject of Cantonese opera and Hong Kong film. So I think some of our panelists will be talking about this. So we have a very varied program for you. You'll see very many interesting connections. Our scholars today come from different disciplines, from musicology, from film studies, from theater and anthropology, and so on. And so I think that I've probably used up my time now, and I want to get you to the meat, but we're also looking forward to a great discussion and a great and lively Q&A. And so I will just bring you to our first speaker, Professor Gina Marchetti, who's going to talk about the influence of Cantonese opera on Hong Kong women filmmakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith and Mark. And I'm going to share my screen now. And I'm going to just talk only about films that deal with Cantonese opera that were made by women filmmakers. It's one of my research interests right now. And there's so much intersection, so many intersections between women filmmakers and Cantonese opera that I thought that I would just talk about really three aspects. I'm only going to give a few examples from these three themes that I've seen run through many women's films. First is women filmmakers are often inspired by that fluidity of gender that Judith mentioned in her introduction, so that very often female roles are questioned, and that there's a lot of women who cross-dress as men in these films as well. So there's a kind of thematic that runs through on the questioning of heterosexual norms in the face of female desire that many women filmmakers have picked up on. Also, many of these films deal with war trauma, particularly with the Japanese occupation and continuing trauma associated with the Cold War, British colonialism, American neocolonialism, and also the trauma very often of diaspora. One of the things also Judith alluded to is the fact that opera performers very often would travel around the world, as did films, so that there were joint circuits of both films and opera performances that traveled everywhere from the United States, of course, we know San Francisco, to places as far-flung as Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, of course, as well as many, many parts of Asia. So I'm going to be hitting on these three themes as we look at some examples from women's work and that intersection, that very important intersection between women's sensibilities as filmmakers and this rich tradition of Cantonese opera. The first thing that I'd like to do is just point out probably the best known pair of performers, Yem Kim Phai and Bak Sweat Sin, who were very well known as Cantonese opera divas here in Hong Kong, and also all through really the Pearl River Delta region, all throughout this area, as well as throughout the diaspora. Now, these women continue to have a legacy. I know one of the questions that came up even before we started the webinar was, do people still pay attention to Cantonese opera? Are they still influenced by Cantonese opera? Yes, indeed. And as you can see with just these two examples, that we have a Google Doodle from 2016, as well as Pat Suet Sin getting honorary doctorates as recently as just this month from the Education University of Hong Kong, where she's been honored there, and she was honored earlier in 2004 by the University of Hong Kong, where I work. Now, when we look at this, we realize that cross-dressing is clearly important. And when we look at the difference between Cantonese opera and the better known Peking opera, we realize that some of this has to do with the way in which the operas position themselves in terms of the imagination of gender. And in Peking opera, of course, we have the legacy of Mei Lan Fang and these amazing performers who cross-dressed as women, and within all male troupes. And in Cantonese opera, we had both mixed troupes as well as all female performances, mixed very much in the cinema, where we'd have men and women sometimes performing roles that were worked in conjunction with their biological gender and sometimes against it. So we had a lot of these mixed troupes, etc. And then, of course, I think people are very familiar with the Shaoxing opera, where they were all female troupes, etc. So there was quite a range in terms of how people interpreted their roles against gender or counter to their biological gender. And Yen King Thai, of course, was just amazing at that. I want to show you, just to give you a little example of how these two amazing opera performers worked together, okay? And so let's show the clip now.
霍小姐，
Okay, as you can see, we have this kind of idealization of masculinity embodied by this woman performer that really had quite an impact on the LGBTQ community here in Hong Kong. And other filmmakers picked up on this, including Yao Ching, who's a very well-known documentary and experimental filmmaker who works in LGBTQ issues, particularly dealing from a lesbian perspective. So I want to show you a clip from a film that Swetsun's Sisters, which was inspired by that famous duo. We'll show that now.
我細個嗰時候都幾中意睇任劍輝嘅，最初唔中意睇，因為我細個咧就好憎睇粵劇嘅，因為覺得粵劇咧好老土嘅，篤篤撐咁樣樣咧，細個就會覺得好老土嘅咁。咁後來咧就睇粵語殘片，睇電視嗰啲粵語殘片，咁有陣時就會播翻即係任劍輝嗰啲電影啦或者粵劇啦咁。咁睇睇下咧，我就幾被佢吸引喎，即係覺得佢好有型啊！嗰陣時覺得佢哇好有型啊咁樣咯。 即係同埋佢真係好有一種嘅我其實都好難解釋翻嗰種對當時對我嚟講一種嘅咩吸引力。
你覺得佢係男人嚟嘅，因為你覺得係女人嚟？
我知佢係女人嚟㗎，但係佢就係一個好似男嘅女人，但係其實因為好似男人，佢又唔似得晒嘅喎，係咪啊？咁所以係咯。
係啊，男人唔係咁做戲。
同埋喺嗰個時代嚟講，即係以我好細個嘅時代，佢唔係嗰啲我哋會認為靚仔嗰啲男性外貌咯。咁所以多啲係佢個 gestures 啊，即係佢嗰啲表達嘅方式嗰種嘅姿勢啊。
咁咪點得咧？擰下咁樣。嗱，好似我咁，嗱，你睇住我行啦嚇，你學我咁行就得啦。
我
Okay. Well, as you can see, that she takes delight in reliving these roles and seeing herself or seeing part of her own identity melding into Yem Kim Phai's and her role with Suet Sin in the duet. Now, I'd like to move on to another woman filmmaker, Anne Hui, who just received a Lifetime Achievement Award at Venice this year. So she's probably Hong Kong's best known woman filmmaker. She made a film early in her career called The Spooky Bunch, which is set within a Cantonese opera troupe on Chung Chau Island. And the interesting thing about this film is that it deals with Judith's favorite topic, ghosts. And it deals with a troupe that's haunted by ghosts from the past. And they are brought in really to try to exorcise a curse that had roots in a landlord's curse that is interesting because not only is it this landlord's curse that's being exorcised, and they use the women in the troupe as kind of bait, but part of the other ghosts that come in and are attracted to this troupe are from the Japanese occupation, as you can see here in this still from the film, where we have Japanese troops coming in who remind the viewers of the trauma of the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong. And also it's kind of a nod to Anne Hui's own past. Her mother was Japanese and met her father during the war. Her father was a Kuomintang officer in Manchuria. So they met during the war. So it also brings in a bit of her own authorial presence into the film through these references to ghosts and the haunting from the historical past. It's interesting too because of the gender component here with the women playing such an important role within the troupe, and also are the ones who are seen as needed for bait for these Japanese officers that come in. I want to also now move to another well-known documentary filmmaker, Louisa Wei, who is quite active right now, and she works at City University of Hong Kong. She was attracted to that archive, that rich archive that also Judith mentioned, the Hong Kong Film Archive here. We have a really rich archive, and she worked with archivists there to really uncover a little known story of Esther Ng. Esther Ng is one of the, what can I say, underappreciated pioneers of Hong Kong diasporic cinema. She was born in California and made a reputation for herself traveling around the world as a filmmaker as well as a distributor. Now, she herself was an open lesbian, and she had many liaisons, both professional and personal, with members of Cantonese opera troupes throughout her lifetime. Now, she's best known, and I had to bring this up, she's best known for giving the film debut to Bruce Lee. This is Bruce Lee here, cross-dressing within Cantonese opera fashion. From male to female here, he plays a little baby girl in Golden Gate Girl, one of her signature films. And as you may know, Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, so he could become the Golden Gate Girl there because his family's opera troupe was there when he was born. And his father, of course, is a very well-known Cantonese opera performer who traveled. So this gives you a sense of that diaspora playing an important role. Now, because Louisa made this film on Esther Ng, she became very interested in the diasporic dimension of Cantonese opera. So she made a subsequent film called Havana Divas. And I'm going to show you, she explains things in her trailer better than I ever could about the connections between Havana, Cuba, Hong Kong, and Cantonese opera. So let's show that trailer now.
Cuba siguió buscando la compañía porque habían 4 compañías. El Coscon fue la primera. Tenía 8 años, trabajé ahí en el Shanghái.
山先生咧喺美國好耐嘅，都喺抗戰時候咧，佢就做好多抗日粵劇咧，咁佢都用支鞭打日本人，好新潮一個人嚟㗎。
1939年，人哋請嚟金山大舞台做過，我6個月合同嚟啫嘛，要扯啦，後尾日本仔嚟打珍珠港啦，我咪唔扯得咯。
How do you like Castro?
Bueno, cuando era joven era muy simpático, guapo, sí, era alto.
我阿爺同我爸咧翻到嚟香港，好風光嘅。59年之後，佢兩代喺古巴嘅努力咧化為烏有。
Okay. Now, as you can see, there's quite a lot of crossover potential here for women between gender, sexuality, history, and diaspora. I want to just mention one last thing before I wrap up completely. I wanted to invite you, if you're interested in women filmmakers, to visit our Hong Kong Women Filmmakers site and also like us on Facebook. And also I want to say one other thing about this kind of haunted quality very often you see in some of the films that I've mentioned. The Cantonese Opera performed here in Hong Kong is often performed during a ghost festival. And often these operas are performed to entertain ghosts anyway. So when we see things like Spooky Bunch, or when we see these opera performances in the films having that kind of haunted quality, it would resonate with people here as well. So the gender fluidity, the haunted quality, the nostalgia, and also the connection to the cultural past becomes out very strongly in these women's work. And I invite you to visit the website and get to know more about these fascinating women filmmakers and their work on Cantonese cinema. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful, Gina. I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Professor Kenny Ying is going to talk about An Affair to Remember, 2 singing episodes in Cantonese film adaptations.
Okay, so you can all hear me? Yeah. Okay, so thank you. I'm happy that Gina just talked about have a mapping of transnational historical of Cantonese opera developments and its kind of intersection. I think my talk is focusing more on a microscopic crossover of forms between opera and film, picking up 2 episodes to talk about the artistic crossover of Cantonese opera film. The 2 clips I'm going to talk, I'll give them 2 notions. The first is the cinematization of Cantonese opera, 粵劇電影化, and I pick up Gina just showed the clip of the film Legend of Purple Hairpin, 紫釵記, and also featuring, of course, the household name任劍輝and 白雪仙. And the second clip I'm going to show is a film, actually, I would call operization of film, which is very indebted to Cantonese opera aesthetics, which was Li Shenfeng's Spring, edited from Ba Jin's novel. Okay, so maybe a little bit conceptual, but I think very easy to catch up, is about how early Cantonese filmmakers try to, also Chinese filmmakers try to create a form, right, of Chinese opera film. In Cantonese opera film, I would say in the 1940s and especially 1950s, there are a lot of very remarkable achievements. But when we first talk about the two forms, theater, Chinese theater, and modern cinema, we kind of understand that, right? The Chinese theater, like the opera, has a lot of what we call the stylization, 程式化, okay? In terms of your facial expressions, painted faces, in terms of speeches, the libretto, the words, also what we call in Chinese, the chen nim zhou da, is the chanting in music, in lyrics, and the reciting in words, action that include a lot of stylized body movements, and also da is may understood as like acrobatics, martial arts, dancing. Also there are a lot of training and conventional codes that condense into the art of opera actions. But when we talk about the stage, of course, the stage is kind of two-dimensional stage, right? The audience just sitting up front, in front of the stage, and the time is linear. We see the story flowing from one point of time to another. So imagine the earlier opera film documentary. Basically, you have a camera and without much editing, just shooting, recording the whole performance on stage. That's basically the theatrical audience experience. Of course, a lot of imagination, a lot of art counts on how this Chen Nim Zhou Da, they experiment with forms and ideas. So this is the theater world. And when early filmmakers came to adapt opera or create opera film, of course, a lot of difficulties in terms of techniques and artistics. If you understand cinema, basically, in terms of realism, we are calling this is about the illusion of realism, right? The props, the setup, basically signify the real thing. One example is like if we have a horse riding in Chinese theater, you usually have these invisible horse, but in cinema, of course, you basically have a real horse, and you have the real physical settings, the real time with light and darkness. You have different camera shots of different distances and angles, basically guiding the audience to see what the film wants to show you to see. You have the camera movement that create a kind of action, editing, that basically dissecting time and space, which is very different from the theater. And the mise-en-scène, of course, includes all the props, all the setups, which basically cannot be just stagey. So you have these two very different, generally very different schemes. And in film, you have a three-dimensional space. You have non-linear time that can be cut up and dissected by techniques of editing and different techniques. So you have a kind of discontinuity. So this is interesting. And when we try to look at the following clip, I will try to, you may try to see how these two cross over with each other. This film, of course, coming from the very well-known Purple Hairpin in 1959. Besides Yam Kim Fai and Ba Xuexin, of course, we have the very famous playwright Tang Dixon, who basically adapt a earliest Tang Dynasty Chuanqi story, and then later actually redone by Ming Dynasty Tang Xianzu. It's basically a story about Fox Xiu Yu, that's played by Ba Xuexin, and Lei Yik, played by Yam Kim Fai, who is a imperial scholar that is, of course, coming from the Tang Dynasty background. In the story, Fox Xiu Yu, of course, is kind of like fallen angel, kind of ill-fated courtesan. If you recall the line she sent in the episode that shows that she actually comes from a fallen royal family, but later, of course, fallen on hard, bad fate, and then become a kind of courtesan and even a prostitute. So after Li Yik gains the status, the scholar status, actually, he is seduced by a high official to marry his daughter. And so, of course, Fo Siyok become kind of abandoned, right? This is another melodramatic plot in this movie, okay? So what I'm going to show you is a scene also very laden with music and singing, of course, very pleasant lyrics of 春光花月夜, moonlight night on the Spring River, which also has a rich history, translocal history, Cantonese musician adapted actually from a Shanghai Chinese orchestral music, which actually came from very old musical repertoire, the original scores. Okay, so in this, we're going to show you 2-minute, 90-second clip, and you will see this is basically the scene followed by the scene we saw. Okay, the scene we just saw is about the meeting, the encounter, right? The flirting each other. Of course, right now that the woman knows that the man is going to very likely to marry the rich man, the rich official's daughter, though she's feeling abandoned, and then the man comes back. Okay, there are some emotional ups and downs, and they have kind of misunderstanding, outbursts of emotion. But finally, the man tells the woman that, right, he is still in love. Sub Long has never been unfaithful. Okay, but we know that actually Tang Dixon has hugely changed the plot, because in the original Tan story, the scholar is kind of selfish scholar. Actually, he really abandons the woman. Okay, so this is the line that he says, that love is everything, power means nothing to him. Okay, so let us just watch the 1-minute clip about this singing scene. Okay, thanks. Okay. Okay. So okay, I'm going to show you also some of the shots covered in the sequence that we haven't seen yet. What is interesting, I like the very ingenious shots about the two maids that's overhearing that the couples, right, the conflicts. That overhearing somewhat like break up this stagey two-dimensional space and give you a kind of realistic detail, realistic illusion that, right, this is something for real, that you kind of implicated the audience sitting together within the time and space, and and witnessing the story, witnessing the lovers' tribulations. And I think that is somewhat what I want to mean the realistic, illusory realism in cinema. That is basically enriching the opera, the stagey performance. Here, of course, the different shots, the different the close-ups, and also you have deep space, the kind of very dynamic. You have the close-up of the hairpin, of course, is the token of the love of the couple. This is creates a dynamic movement, dynamic visual sensation experience. Basically, if you have a singer singing for too long, for 10 minutes, and with a stable shots, basically the audience will be bored to death. So you have to create that kind of a dynamics and energies into the sequence. And here, of course, there are a lot of actually operatic heritage, particularly in these frontal shots. We have seen a lot of frontal shots, but it's never feeling static because you have the stars, very, very excellent performance, and also the expressions. You also have some like tracking shots and movements showing the characters walking also horizontally, right, across the screen. I think this is somewhat the operatic heritage of the opera film, and this kind of stasis and movement create a kind of tension and interaction within the narrative itself, and creates a very interesting cinematic visual way of storytelling. Okay, so I think this is something we just have a sense in the 1 minute clip. So here I'm talking about another film adapted from Bajin, and there are of course also two very famous Cantonese stars, Ba Yin and Chao. Okay, this is we know of this family story of Bajin. Basically, it's this integration of the family, and they are so pressured by the fatalistic family system, and of course, and the man played as godson. Actually, his cousin Wai Biu Mui is in love, secretly in love with him. This is a tragic story of unrequited love. And in this scene, you're showing all this, I would say, Cantonese opera aesthetics of singing, of camera movements, of the space and time. But interestingly, this is different from the previous clip because this is somewhat I call the collective drama, the Huanhei, right? This is about the fate of a collective, not the family or as the nation writ large. So you have the different shots showing the different participants, the characters within the scene and their different reactions. So I think this is also how the cinematic techniques creates this imagined, right, communities on screen, which I would say that break into the limits of opera stage. You show this kind of collective category on the screen. And particularly, I want to mention the discontinuity of the shot actually linked up by the continuity of singing and music, and here of the folksy nam yam, right? Somewhat what we call this Cantonese southern tones or Cantonese blues, because it's all about sadness and frustrations and very expressionistic melodies and lyrics. Okay, so I would like to show this final clip as the end, but I would say like pay attention to sound and image, and particularly sound. I hope to invoke Robert Bresson, very important French director, who once comment on the importance of sound. The ear goes more toward the within, the eye toward the outer, and also the rhythms. You made the film somewhat like a musical piece, band content to form and also band sense to rhythms. I think this is somewhat very important, creates the kind of heightened lyricism in Chinese theater as well as in Cantonese film, especially in this episode. Okay, so I will wrap up the talk by showing this last 2-minute episode from the film Spring. Okay, thanks. Yeah, this is the end. Yeah.
Great, that's wonderful. And now we move on to our third talk, Professor Sai-Xing Yong from NSU, and he's going to take us back in time to the Hollywood musical comedy, to Cantonese opera and Hong Kong movie remaking The Love Parade.
Sorry. Okay, start again. Okay, thank you again for the Judith and Mark and allowing me to share my passion with all the audience about Cantonese opera and Hong Kong movie. And today I will discuss with you a interesting a movie produced in Hong Kong in 1957 entitled 玄宫宴史. And it's a remake of a Hollywood movie. The title is The Love Parade in 1929. And using these two movies, I would like to discuss some interesting issue about the interaction of Hollywood musical comedy, Cantonese opera, and Hong Kong movie. The first issue. The second issue, through this 玄宫宴史 produced by 1950s by the so-called MP and GI, the 电懋公司. I will show the cultural interaction between Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Singapore. Okay, next one, please. Okay, why this 玄宫宴史 so interesting? At the right-hand side, okay. Okay, it represents a kind of special Cantonese opera. It's a kind of fusion. Today, food, we have the fusion cuisine, right? But the 玄宫宴史 is a fusion or mixture of Hollywood movie and Cantonese opera singing. It means that the costume, the background, it's a European background, right? Okay, it's an emergent historical setting in Europe, probably in the early 20th century or the late 19th century. But they offer the dialogue and the speech in Cantonese, and they sing Cantonese opera song. This tradition traced back to 1930s. I go back to that again. This is produced by the 国际电梦公司 MP&GI, stand for the Motion Picture and General Investment Film Production Company, known as the 电梦公司 or 国泰公司. I think some of you may heard about this 电梦公司. They produce Mandarin movie, right? A lot of famous one. But anyway, in 1955, they set up and separate production section called the Cantonese movie section to produce Cantonese movie by this 电梦公司. Okay, come back to this 全宫宴士 is a kind of fusion. Okay, it's a kind of Cantonese opera movie in a broad sense. It's a adaptation or remake of a Hollywood movie in 1929. It's called The Love Parade. Okay, for this Love Parade, you pay attention to several things. First, in 1929 is just the start of the so-called the sound movie, the talkies. Okay, before 1930, before that era, more of the still was the silent movie. But at that time, Hollywood started to have this explore the possibility in making use of the technology of sound to produce so-called sound movie. So they fully utilize this sound technology, the new technology. How to explore it is to have a lot of singing. Okay, okay. For this, let me see. And the second one, for this Love Parade, is produced in 1929. Is we call a pre-code Hollywood. I don't have time to go to that. Okay, but I show the clip. You know what I mean. Pre-code means we have some sexy and violent things involved in this so-called this movie. Okay, next one, please. Okay, this movie originally this directed by a very famous director, Ernst Lubitsch. He's a very famous director, but at the point of one thing, in 1930, the movies produced by Lubitsch it was released in Shanghai. It's created a lot of impact to the pop culture of Shanghai and all the big cities. So beside on the top of this Cantonese opera, the sing-song troupe, the vaudeville, for example, the Plum Flower troupe, the 梅花歌歌舞团, they also produce the Love Parade. Okay, and on this department store in Shanghai, you can usually buy the so-called the records of this the Love Parade. So the story and the movie of the Lubitsch produced a lot of impact, not only to Hong Kong, not only Cantonese, but for the whole, I mean the main popular culture of China in the 1930s. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so this come back to this the Love Parade. It's about the love story between, so the setting also be in the late 19th or early 20th century Europe. So between the love story of the Queen Louisa of Slovenia, starring Jeanette MacDonald, and the Count Alfred Renault, movie Soufflé in the 1929. So you can see all the costume. It's a kind of it's an emerging world of Europe in somewhere in some place, right? And as I mentioned, it's early just the beginning of just start the so-called the sound movie. So the two actors, Jeanette MacDonald and Maurice Sullivan, they were all singers. They're opera singers or entertainers. Okay, they make use of this new technology and to sort of explore all the possibility of sound. And on the right-hand side, you can see a sexy scene. This is what I mean by Peacock Hollywood. So this is taking a bath in this kind of scene in this movie of Queen Louisa. So my question is, how this so-called sexy scene was represented in a Cantonese movie in the 1950s Hong Kong. Okay, next one, please. Okay, Shortly after the Love Parade of Hollywood was released in 1929, shortly the two most important well-known Cantonese opera actors, Xue Juexian and Ma Shizheng, and they adapted this movie and put it on the stage, on the Cantonese opera stage in 1930. Okay, when the Love Parade, when it was released in Shanghai, was screened in Shanghai in 1929, the Chinese translation title is 玄宫宴士. So they make a big sensation and create a huge box office success. So everybody knows it. So that the most famous so-called the Cantonese opera actor Xue Juexian and Ma Shizheng, they adapted into Cantonese opera. Okay, next one, please. Okay, now we see the genealogy of this development of this 玄宫宴士. Okay, originally in 1929, it was a Hollywood movie produced by the Parliament, and then shortly it became a Cantonese movie. A Cantonese opera. Okay, it's a play. It's at that time is a special term is called the Western style Cantonese opera. 西装戏 means that they dress in a European style and then sing Cantonese opera. And also the 玄宫宴士, the Cantonese opera play, was so popular. And then in 1934, the unique film production, they produced this Cantonese opera movie using the same title, 玄宫宴士, become a movie, Cantonese movie. Some of you should hear about this, the Shaw Brothers, right? The so-called unique film production company, 天一电影公司, was the first movie making company of the Shaw Brothers. Okay, so they produced this movie in Shanghai. And then, 1934 is an important year. That year, because they're so important, then the 天一公司, the unique film company, they established and added the second studio in Hong Kong in order to produce Cantonese opera movie and Cantonese movie targeted to Southeast Asia. So this is why I say this is kind of, you can see the cultural interaction through this 玄宫宴士 between Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Southeast Asia. So because the 天一公司, the Shaw Brothers, they suddenly realize it's a big market in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, Malaya, everywhere. So they set up an art studio just in order to produce dialect cinema. There was a Cantonese opera movie targeted to the audience in Southeast Asia. Okay, this is 1934. And after the World War II, the MP and GI, the 电贸电影公司, they produce again, they remake this 玄宫宴士 in 1957. Okay, next one, please. And it's a coverage of the 玄宫宴士, the Cantonese version in 1957. At the right-hand side is the official magazine of the MP and GI, the 电贸电影公司 the 电影杂志, the so-called the official movie magazine of the Cathay. And in this issue, they have a long coverage about how they produce this 玄宫宴士. And in this article, they highlight, in order to pay homage to Xue Juexian in the 1930s, the singing style, they try to use back the lyric and also they imitate of the singing style of 1934 to make it very clear. Okay, one of the selling point is the actor Zhang Ying, how they perform Cantonese opera in the style of Xue Juexian, the 学派, the singing. Okay, later I show the clip. You see how Zhang Ying, they intentionally imitate the singing style of Xue Juexian of 1934. Okay, next one, please. Okay, this is some of the photos from the magazines, and you can see this what I meant by the emergent European setting. You can see the Queen at the right above right up corner, the Queen, and then you can see the Grenadier Guard of the female Grenadier Guard at the back. They dress in short pants, is quite sexy. And then you have the Prime Minister, you have the guard, you have the maid, and also the Prince Consort. They're all dressed in a Western, so-called European style. And on the left-hand side, you can see the big bed, and then is the inner chamber of the Queen Louisa. and also the Prince Consort. And at the right hand side, you can see the two comedians, the most famous comedian of Hong Kong, I think, Liang Xingbo and Tan Nanqing. And at the center, again, what I meant by this, how they represent this bathing scene in the original movie of 1929. Okay, from this so-called costume, I need to say some time to show the clips. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, the first clip I hope I can show is the left-hand side. Okay, the night banquet at the Jade Palace. In the original version in 1930s called 夜宴玄宫. It's a very famous classic episode of Cantonese opera singing in 1930s. Of course, performed by Shi Juexian in 1930. And in this part, okay, the background is that. Okay, Zhang Ying is the one, the man. Okay, before he was the Prince Consort, he was a kind of a very romantic playboy. Right? Now everybody is a kind of notorious, is too playful outside the country. So the Queen summoned him, come back, invited to the palace. It's supposed to be a reprimand interrogation, but turned out to be flirtation. And the Queen fall in love with this handsome man during this so-called interrogation. It's very famous, called the 夜宴玄宫, the night banquet at the Jade Palace. Okay, please, so the clip, please.
你都可以飲杯啊！
飲埋呢杯啦，又好。我問你咧，你喺外出邊識埋咁多女人，究竟有邊個值得你最中意嘅呢？都係好平凡，冇乜邊個中意。係咩？咁你平日除咗向女人調情之外，冇啊，我冇向女人調情噶，都係佢哋向我咋。又算你。咁除咗平日啲女人向你調情之外，你仲有咩事做啊？都係唱下歌啊，寫下曲啊咁啫。哦。乜你識唱歌嘅咩？普普通通啦。咁你有咩新歌唱支俾我聽下？咁你聽住啦，陛下。仙公開夜宴，何
Okay, because time is limited, I thought I better stop here. Okay, let me stop. Can you have some time to show the Hollywood's version? That's the same part, like banquet.
Plenty left, if she were alive.
Like.
If she were alive. Loves I have known are buried in the past. They couldn't last with you. None of them could ever hold me fast in the way you do. Yet their memories seem to cling to me. Something from each one you bring to me. Eyes of Lisette, smile of Mignonette, the sweetness of Suzette in you displayed. Grace of Delphine, charm of Josephine, the cuteness of Pauline in you I read. Those other charms with yours need not be told. No other arms but yours could ever hold me. Lips of Lucy, beauty of Camille, you are my dear, my love parade. Eyes of Lisette, smile of Mignonette, the sweetness of Suzette. That's in you.
Okay, Chris, that's it. Okay, please show the last slide, please, Chris. The last one. Okay, I don't think I have time to show this one. I don't want to eat into the time of Heidi. So maybe I can show it during the Q&A time. It's a sexy part of the movie. It's the movie of the Picot era. It's the King Louisa take a bath. And I want to show you how the same idea was represented in the Hong Kong's counterpart. Maybe, anyway, Judith, do you think I have time to show, or let Heidi go ahead first?
I think let's go on with Hetty and then come back in the discussion.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's it. Thank you. Okay.
Great. It's amazing to me how much the two male leads looked alike. So, all right, our final talk is Professor Hetty Law. She's going to talk to us about Cantonese opera and Cantonese musical.
Okay, so I guess the PowerPoint is ready. And all right. So in June earlier this year, the Hong Kong Film Archive published a richly documented bilingual collection of essays on Cantonese opera films that explains how the theatrical genre of Cantonese opera was adapted by Hong Kong cinema. Yet, this kind of adaptation did not end with films. Today, I want to talk about intersections between Cantonese musical developed in the early 1990s and Cantonese opera, and more specifically about a composer called Leon Ko Go Sai Zhang. Currently one of the top composers of film music and Cantonese musical in the territory, who wrote music for the 2003 production called The Good Person of Sichuan, Seichun Houyan. After watching this musical at the theater, the Cantonese opera icon Bak Shu-sin asked him to recompose the opening scene, interludes, and the epilogue of the Cantonese opera canon, The Flower Princess, Dai Loi Fa, for the 50th anniversary of this classic staged at the theater in November 2006. They collaborated 2 more times in 2014 and 2017. So what could Bak Shu-sin have heard in The Good Persons of Sichuan? How does Cantonese musical help audiences foster intergenerational collaboration, organize time, process memories, and reimagine histories? To answer this question, I'd like to introduce a component of Cantonese opera called Nan Yam, or Nan Yin in Mandarin, which means narrative song. I will play an excerpt of about 30 seconds of the opening couplet of a Nam Yam classic called Hak Tong Cao Han, Wayfarer's Autumn Lament, sung by Master Du Huan. Chris, I can't hear that. And now I'm going to play a video excerpt of the first 2 minutes of the Smoking Song and the Good Person in Sichuan, which according to the composer himself is based specifically on Namyam. This excerpt was recorded in the most recent rerun of this musical in December 2019 to January 2020. And I thank the Hong Kong Repertory Theatre, 香港話劇團, and Actors Family, 演戲家族, for giving me the exclusive right to play this excerpt for this panel discussion.
食兩啖煙，快活過。當初努力過，望住煙灰飛過，笑話我真傻。時代已經不屬我，
食兩啖煙你咪算咯。
人未老，大志多未老，想得到，去得到，明白到，力到，心未到，走不到，已經老。充滿淚人。我得到半生辛勞，削崩呢半張刀，肚餓時光強盜，菜刀邊做剃刀，雙不對毛。
What is intriguing about this song is that I could not relate it to Namyam when I first listened to it. While it is true that the song is presented as an autobiographical narrative, which is typical of many Namyam pieces, some defining Namyam features, such as the standard interlude instrumentation, the rhyme scheme, and the couplet and quatrain structure, are not employed. Yet, Leon told me repeatedly over email that he incorporated Namyam elements in this song by using microtonal inflections, and that he trained the singers to bring up quarter tones in the performance. His words helped me to revise my listening strategy. I began to listen for the materiality of performance by focusing on timbre and microtonal inflections within the tonal framework. Then I began to notice the diminished fifth interval, which suggests the Yifan mode, the deliberate gliding tone in the vocal, guzhang and the pipa parts, periodicity and hypermetric patterns, and the ostinato bass that resembles the Namyam cyclic form. I also noticed that lyricist Chris Shum, Sam Weizhong, did not write a text following the standard Namyam prosody. Rather, his text shows a single rhyme scheme and internal rhyme that have a higher rhyme and tone density than of most Namyam pieces. Hence, the music and text of the song suggest narrative song elements without directly quoting Namyam materials. These songs recomposes Namyam with a familiar but estranged compositional surface. It was likely that Bak Sui-sin recognized the potential of these compositional strategies for reimagining a Cantonese opera classic. What I love about this performance is the bare-bone aesthetics that amplifies every musical element. This aesthetic instills an agency in the song. It commands attentive listening. It demands interpretation. It interpolates or calls out audiences to examine their listening positionality. Cantonese speaking listeners would be sensitive to the Cantonese rhyme and tone pattern. Cantonese and non-Cantonese speaker might pick up elements of narrative song that are found in various oral traditions. Audiences might recall moments of intergenerational social gatherings, listening to Cantonese opera at the theater, or watching Cantonese opera films with friends, teachers, relatives, parents, or grandparents. Listeners trained in the Western art music tradition might interpret the microtonal inflection as a counterpoint to the equal temperament tuning system that indicate colonialism. Thus, this song opens up a feeling and interpretive space at the theater for audiences to process memories, to individualize their histories, and to experience time as nonlinear. The collective experience of nonlinear time and discontinuous history traversing between past and the present orchestrates an effective charge at the theater. And the desire for this charge, I argue, helps to explain the ongoing interest in Cantonese musical. For example, Leon and Chris's new musical called The Great Pretender, Dai Zhong Wang, is scheduled to premiere at the West Kowloon C2 Center next month. That's all I have to share today.
Thank you so much. That left me really wanting more and to sort of want to know more about Cantonese musical. So now we have a discussion. I think we have a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting overlaps here, a lot of themes coming in and out. And I guess we will talk a little bit among ourselves, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. How are we doing on time, actually, Mark? Are we sort of at the end of our time already?
We have time for a few questions.
All right, well then in that sense, we'll fold in the discussion and go straight to the Q&A. So one of the questions that we had, and I think that this is is a question really for Hetty in some ways. The theme of this whole series that University of Chicago Center is running here in Hong Kong, was Mark's, I think, brilliant brainstorm, this Hong Kong Redux, sort of looking back at 1950s and 1960s Hong Kong. And of course, that is the golden age of opera film, specifically filmed operas, or where the, I think, influence is strongest. And that's not just true in Hong Kong, that's true in mainland China too. By the 1980s, this genre is really sort of disappearing. And so one of the questions that we got, in fact, it was from Alison Friedman, who is the, I guess, executive director of the new C2 Center, was whether this connection between Hong Kong film and, or we'll say Hong Kong theater, I'm going to broaden it a little bit, and Cantonese opera is still kind of an ongoing thing, or whether it's really something only, say, in present day, rechanneling, repurposing this kind of nostalgia, or the way Hetty opened it up to thinking about multi-generational viewing. So I'm going to direct this question to Hetty first.
I think one way to address this question is to just share my screen so you can see that. And this is the 2006 reproduction of Dai Lui Fa, you know, like we've talked about it multiple times. And so like that really shows that right at the very end of this. And so I'm going to play a very, very short thing. The reason why I want to play this short clip is that Park Soo-sin herself commissioned Go Sai-jung to recompose the ending and the opening scene. And so therefore we see that kind of continuity, you know, for the 50th anniversary of this. So therefore we're talking about half a century of reception history. And, you know, Park Soo-sin herself reimagined that using like contemporary style. Go Sai-jung was trained in Northwestern as a composer. So therefore we can do another sequel, you know, of this exchange just based on this 2006 production. And so therefore, now we're talking about a clear intentionality because, you know, Park Soo-sin herself commissioned that. And Go Sai-jung was so worried about this because Go Sai-jung was, I did not grow up listening to this. It is a kind of, you know, and so I know a little bit about this. And then Park Soo-sin herself said, don't worry about this. And so I'm going to train you. And Go Sai-jung himself, you know, wrote about more than a dozen, you know, draft and kind of show her that's a real collaboration. So therefore, I think, you know, like when I talk about intergenerational kind of bonding, that really shows that, wow, I listened to those things with my grandma and my parents, and my mom and sings Cantonese opera as a kind of amateur. So therefore, we really see that kind of, like when I listen to Cantonese opera, like my generation, I remember my mom, my grandparents, and my teachers and friends. That is the kind of the social fabric of Cantonese opera. That's kind of, you know, and these days we can all watch Cantonese opera on YouTube anyway. So therefore, it's really not confined to the location of the theater. And so when we take a look at that, wow, you know what? You know, the recent composers, and I can just give you a handful of them. We're all kind of influenced. It's kind of in our blood. But the thing is how to tease out the story in a kind of scholarly fashion. You know, like by pointing all of those kind of junctures, like really specific junctures that show the continuity and change. And I think that's just a lot of kind of ongoing continuity there. And of course, you know, Alex Friedman might know that I'm going to give 2 talks about the Dai Zhonglong and at the Situ Center and sometime next month, just to talk about that kind of continuity and change in specific musical terms.
That's great. Thank you so much. So a question now for Gina here, and that was with regards to gender performativity, how are Cantonese opera films important as distinguished from live performance of Cantonese opera?
Yeah,
So,
I started to answer that in the chat because I wasn't sure if we're going to get to it in the discussion. It's a good question. Most of the filmmakers that I speak to about Cantonese opera reference the films. Now, it could be because they're filmmakers, but as Hetty just pointed out, Cantonese opera is pervasive locally. So that people sometimes, I mean, I've been just walking around and seen a bamboo theater pop up with some Cantonese opera coming out of it when you go to a village festival or what have you. So it is pervasive. We've got a lot of people who bond over Cantonese opera who are real fans. So I'm sure it varies from filmmaker to filmmaker, but like I said, most of the ones that I've talked to mention specifically that they've seen revivals of the films, or they've watched it on TV or through tapes or in other ways. And that the films themselves, I think, in terms of gender performance, that you get a real literally close-up view. And you get this kind of sense of, okay, I'm performing gender in a certain way based on, or I'm having fantasies about my gender performativity in a certain way because of that intimacy that you get with the film medium. In terms of going to the theater, like I said, that may have more influence on people who reimagine Cantonese opera in the theaters themselves rather than on screen. So I'm working in a different world with the kind of screen folks that I work with.
right. So another question that we got earlier was which directors might have been most influenced by Cantonese opera in their filmmaking. And so in our discussion, one of the filmmakers that immediately came to mind was Stanley Kwan. And I don't know if we have time to show another clip or not, but his masterpiece, Rouge, Yenjiako from 1987, which takes as its theme again through the ghost story, takes as its theme a kind of juxtaposition of a nostalgia and discovery of the Hong Kong past with sort of these kind of 1980s yuppies who know nothing about their history. And that history is, to some extent, in many ways, configured through past entertainment culture of courtesans and the brothels, but also Cantonese opera and music. And so there's a sort of a wonderful scene in the opening of the film, which is a kind of homage. In fact, it echoes the Naiyin sequence that Kenny played. And I don't know if we have time to just show it. It gives us, of course, the immortal and greatly lamented Zhang Guorong and Mei Yanfang in their meeting in this film. And I think you can see here how the, in almost every respect, this nostalgia for the past, the ghostliness of the past is still configured through the conventions of opera, including cross-dressing. So here we have Mei Yanfang is dressed as a man. So it's another way in which we see these.
Judith, I want to add some point. Sorry.
Wait, can we stop it for a minute? Yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I want to add another point. Just show the clip first.
Okay.
Yeah.
你睇斜陽照住嗰對雙飛燕，多依紅窗。聽得秋聲，紅葉落，又只見亭橋水流，所第一樁景更添情懊惱，為我懷人愁對。愁對月華圓，邊得嚟咁多愁啫？
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to, so Sai-Xing, did you want to comment here?
Oh, yeah. I just want another point is that the question was, how does Cantonese opera influence the director of Hong Kong movie, right? But what at one point is that besides Cantonese opera, Peking opera has a lot of influence on the Hong Kong movie. What about this one? For example, Yuan Woping, Sambo Hong, Jackie Chan. They were all trained as Peking opera actors when they were kids. I mean, a lot of the Qi Xiaofu, the story, right? Okay, it's also beyond Hong Kong film. Their influence is out to Hollywood. For example, they become the action choreographer of The Matrix, Coaching Tiger, King Dragon. This kind of so-called transnational cinema, they have put in a lot of Peking opera martial art in the modern action cinema. So I want to add this point to just like supplement to what Judith was talking about, the Peking opera and the Cantonese opera influences on the Hong Kong actors on the side of the so-called action cinema. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Great.
I'd like to add a point about Rouge, if I could, just to underscore the fact Stanley Guan was the first major filmmaker to come out as gay. Leslie Jung also came out as gay after they both made this film, and that the sexual dynamics, for people who are interested in that and brought that up in the Q&A, the sexual dynamics in that scene are quite intense and really operate to underscore the fact that later on there was no surprise that both of them did come out as gay.
Yeah. So another question would be, I'm looking now, we have so many questions and so little time, right? One of the questions that we have, and I think I'm going to actually maybe ask Kenny about this, is the relationship of TV as the triangulation, right? We've had film, we have live theater and different forms of that live theater, but TV and we could expand it, I suppose, to earlier to radio and records, but the role of TV, and you could bring in your own personal experience. I can say for myself that another way that I started working on Chinese opera film and Ghost was when I was in Beijing, and I was, this old film came on TV and I was absolutely shocked that it was from 1958 and it was a ghost film made in China at that time. And so a lot of people have told me that they've really seen these films on TV. So I wondered if someone who grew up in Hong Kong, whether you have some feelings on that, Kenny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 1970s, 80s when we grew up. I think a lot of Cantonese opera films were shown on TV for interesting commercial reasons. They were bought by the TV channel, the TVB and RTV, the two major TV channels, and they show them in a lot of time in daytime, and when we were kids, when we on holidays and day off, and basically the parents saw films at the TVs together with us. I would like to add one point is like, interestingly, what we understood about Cantonese opera, or actually through the medium of TV and the medium of cinema. So in a way, it's kind of like reverse, that we understand the rule, the basics of the opera stage through the visual media, the television and the cinema. This is exactly what Mei Lanfang want to make his film operas, said to his producers that he want to preserve his skills through a kind of like a more durable medium of the cinema at the time, because the stage is kind of one-off performance. No one would know and would witness again what Mei Lanfang's the greatness of any opera artist, but it's through the visual medium, the television, the cinema. Basically, if not for TV programs, we will not have known about Yam Kim Fai or Ba Shu Xin. And through this kind of memories, and when we are growing up and we pursue our interest, we try to like explore the past. So I think this is one way to put the importance of TV culture. That is a very interesting part about Hong Kong television history, in a way that once I was in a Taiwan conference when we talk about all these TV memories, one of the Taiwan scholars just commented they would have hoped that the Taiwan the Taiwan television in the 70s, 80s would have shown more about the Taiyu opera or films, so that people would not have lost the memory about that. So of course, basically, we are now losing our memories about Cantonese film opera, and then we are retrieving this tradition through multiple platforms and experimental venues, just we have Hattie has talked about. So I think it's a very interesting way to think about memories and media. Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, I think that we have gone way over time now. Have we, or do we still have time, Mark?
How about one more question?
Okay, one more question. So many good questions. I guess, again, going forward, one of the questions we have is, well, I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot of this ground. I guess this is another question for Hetty. Just can you elaborate on the experience of materiality of performance through the narrative song element in The Good Person of Sichuan? What you meant by the materiality of song here.
So to illustrate that, I'm going to play something, and this is the opening ostinato. So you still have that in your ear. But when I play on the piano, so like I need to be quite careful because it's 6:15 a.m. in Vancouver. Right? So like when you listen to this. and then it sounds like blues. Okay, and so I have this kind of bluesy quality. But when you listen to this, simply because of the instrumentation and Leon Coates, and it kind of brings out the microtonal. So therefore, you never hear that kind of blues sound. And as a matter of fact, and that is what I call the materiality of the performance. You he really kind of avoid all of those kind of equal temperament sound. And so, and the vocal part, he kind of really brings it out, you know, like by the end of that. Okay, and it this kind of gliding tone, and with the pipa and the guzhang, that really kind of brings out the hong hao, and so like that makes us hear, and that kind of wow, like we're moving away from that kind of colonial, well-tempered kind of tuning and into that kind of space that you really don't quite know what the space is until I talk to him, like, what is that? He said, well, this is Namnyam. I said, huh? Like, really? That this is a kind of recomposition of Namnyam rather than just kind of Namnyam itself. And so, like, because I kind of, you know, read the publications by Tong Kim Moon, at UCWA and Bell Young, and this, no, like, this is not exactly Namnyam. And so that is the really interesting thing, and Basistin kind of latch onto that, where there's a lot of kind of regional elements that seems kind of new, but it's kind of, you know, familiar as well. You know, that's kind of both strange and familiar at the same time. And so what is striking is that, well, why didn't you just kind of recompose for us in 2016, just, you know, show that we have a kind of continuity and kind of looking into the future. And so that is something that's really interesting. Like 50 years after that 1957 there's a kind of, we kind of reframe that using the kind of top film composer and musical composer, and just kind of, you know, redo some of those bits and pieces. And that is the really interesting part.
Okay. All right, well, I want to thank our panelists. I do want to thank our audience for their patience, for their great questions, to Mark, and I especially want to give a call out to Chris, who has been amazing in her handling all of this tech. You know, we're all over the world here, and just wish all of you a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my turn to say thank you. Wow, you know, we even had a live piano performance in this. So how special was that? And, you know, one of the things that I realized as we conceived this project was how deep the water probably was. I actually think it's deeper than I really anticipated. And so I hope we can do more of this. I think we have a really nice group of people with a lot of expertise. Professor Zeitlin, thank you so much for bringing all these fantastic experts together. I'm really excited that we all had a chance to work together on this project. And I'm sure the audience would agree with me too, that this is like really an interesting and informative and also an entertaining program. I'd also like to thank the professors for sharing their insights with us this evening, and for the UN campus team. Got to give another shout out to Chris. I don't know how she pulled it off, but it was fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris, Jessica, Victor, Kitty, Angela, Sandy, you know, everybody that worked on this project to pull it together, for making it a success. And from the UN campus, I'd like to say thank you for joining us this evening. I want to wish you all a very peaceful and safe holiday and New Year. We look forward to seeing you again in 2021. Thanks for you all for joining us, and please stay safe.